Hello. Today, we are going to talk to Kate about her family's experiences of anorexia nervosa, an eating disorder complicated by a type of anxiety. Severe obsessive compulsive disorder, more commonly called OCD. Hello. Please tell us your story. Any history of eating disorders or anxiety in your family?
Well, my family's relationship with food was always positive and healthy, good eating and joy. Except my elder sister. She was often anxious. I remember, when she was around the age of 14, she had a problem with eating. Looking back, I can see my grandfather refed my sister in a very short time. However, there was a lot of shouting and fear. My sister's condition was never given a name.
Tell me about your children.
My husband and I have been married for over 20 years and have 2 gorgeous girls. I love being a parent, and they are great kids. My eldest daughter, now 16, was a difficult baby, and I had many strategies to calm her. She was breastfed, she didn't sleep well. Interestingly, she was always a very good eater, and would eat anything. She was popular and social. Sometimes very anxious about school and friends, to begin with, but it would calm down. My other daughter was an easy baby, with a sweet calm disposition. She slept well and ate well. She adores her busy, bright, big sister, and they mother each other. She is very social, popular, and easy to please.
Tell me about the onset of the anorexia.
Looking back, I can see that the anorexia began about 2 years ago. She was eating, but not enough to maintain her weight and growth. I thought it was an extension of her anxiety, and that I could help her through it. A long family holiday loosened the grip. She came back about 6 kilos heavier. Sadly, she had a stressful time from September onwards, and then, in early December, she interrupted me making a pizza and asked me to put on less cheese. I realized we had a serious problem. I spent the night searching on the internet to find out all I could. The next morning I talked to my daughter, and I made an urgent appointment with our doctor.
So what happened next?
Well, the next few weeks were a catalog of disasters. We went to see our doctor, who was kind and well-meaning, but didn't have a clue about eating disorders. He weighed her and talked to her, but not about food. He gave us a referral to a psychologist who turned out only worked with adults. He said that therapy would help my daughter. He talked down to me, and then went on holiday for a month. In the next 2 weeks, I changed doctors, tried to get referrals to ED specialists. Finally, I phoned the surgery and demanded an emergency appointment. The new doctor was shocked into silence by my emaciated daughter. I calmly asked for help. Her tests showed my daughter had a BMI of just 12. No blood pressure standing up. A pulse below the safe mark. Her ECG was so crazy, they thought the machine was broken. It wasn't. The arrhythmias were terrifying. We were given a referral for that afternoon to an ED clinic as she needed immediate hospitalization.
Were you relieved to get a diagnosis?
No. I remember very clearly thinking, I am in shock. I am very, very frightened. As we walked to the car, I had visions of my beautiful daughter dying by my side. I don't imagine I can successfully resuscitate her, she is so frail. How did we get to this terrifying situation so quickly? I feel I have failed her. I haven't kept her safe. I will never forgive myself if something tragic happens. I am screaming inside my head, grieving, terrified. Outside I am calm and very alert. While we are waiting for the blood tests, I buy a small carton of full cream milk and make her drink it in the waiting room. I know she won't make a fuss in front of everyone. She drinks it. They can't get a blood sample from her. There is not enough blood pressure for the chest tube to fill. I tell them not to stress, as she is on her way to hospital for admission to be stabilized.
What happened at the specialist eating disorder clinic?
For 2 hours, My daughter cries and tells the specialist her story. She starts tentatively and then can't stop. A great deal of it is eating disorder talk, but he listens and tries to work out what to do with us. At the end of the exhausting consultation, the specialist lets me take her home. He has heard my story and what I have achieved so far. He tells me about calorie requirements and to increase slowly, about supplements, and the magic plate. I am so thankful for the doctor's calm, kind manner. I want to hug him. I touch him on the arm gently when we leave and say a sincere thank you. He should have finished work 2 hours ago.
You had an additional problem with your daughter's obsessive-compulsive disorder. How did that affect refeeding?
The first day refeeding was not too difficult. She was compliant and ate what I had given her. It took a long time. She had tummy pain because of the amount of food. Her body had to readjust. I sat next to her at the table or in front of the television and distracted her from some of the anxiety. I had to coax her to eat, but there was little resistance. She cried a little, whined a lot. The OCD really didn't take over for a couple of months. So in the beginning, it was just the checking of doors and under the bed, before she went to sleep. Months later she was consumed by OCD.
What were the rituals? Did they concern just eating?
Not just eating. Some were not directly connected with eating. She washed her hands about 50 times a day. She folded her clothes very neatly, even in the dirty laundry basket. She didn't want her clothes washed with anyone else's in the machine and would hand wash them. She wouldn't use any soap or moisturizer if they had any honey, fruit, or food in them. She couldn't touch many things with her hands. She opened doors with her feet or elbows. She would fidget and tuck her clothes around her legs and bottom for 10 minutes. She didn't realize she did this.
And those more directly connected to food.
She rubbed her mouth with tissue until it bled after every mouthful. She held her breath if she went past a cafe in case she inhaled calories. She couldn't go into a grocery store. She insisted that the recipe book in the kitchen had the "Eating Healthy" book cover showing, because she thought she would get fat looking at a bad food picture. She was convinced that she would absorb calories if someone touched her. She would hold her hands in the air and couldn't touch a knife, a fork, or even a teaspoon. Then, at one stage she was cutting her food into tiny pieces. No different foods could touch on her plate. She tried to spit out her food, but I stopped that very fast. She only wanted to eat food that had been made by me in our own kitchen. Any other food would cause big problems. I ignored this. I learned that the consistent, repeated exposure to normal eating and food helped to overcome the abnormal fears of the eating disorder. It is a critical exposure therapy to food. Normal eating and weight restoration must happen for recovery to take hold.
How did you deal with the OCD? Did you treat it separately from the anorexia?
First, I learned about exposure and response therapy and cognitive behavioral therapy. I saw a video explaining desensitization and decided to do some therapy with my daughter. She had previously had CBT with a therapist, but she wasn't weight restored and she was not cognitively well enough to gain any benefit. I learned to separate the OCD from the sufferer the same as you do for eating disorders. It is not her fault. It is a biological brain disorder. I learned that if you change the behavior, the thoughts will follow. Pick a lesser ritual and work on just that alone. It was very stressful and difficult for my daughter. I watched her closely. If I thought I could push her harder to get a change in behavior, I did. If it was too hard, I let her take it slower. If the desensitization worked, even a little, I persisted. My girl couldn't look at food or touch it, or even touch anything that food may have been in contact with.
How did you do this?
I started by taking her hand as we were walking through the kitchen and making her touch the fridge. Just for a moment. She gasped and flinched and was shocked. She yelled at me. I took her hand again and made her touch it again for a moment longer. All the time, I was telling her what I was doing. She watched me do it to her and then walked away, telling me what she thought of me. The next day when she walked through the kitchen, I said, "I just want you to touch the door of the fridge for a moment again." She couldn't. I moved next to her and told her, "I will help you." She went to walk away. I took her hand. She didn't like it, but she didn't put up as much of a fight, and I forced her hand to touch the fridge. I kept doing this over a week, and then she was thrilled because she could do it herself. We kept pushing through other problems. I asked her how she felt during each of these tasks. "How stressed does this make you feel? How do you feel doing this?" After a while, she realized she could force herself to do these things. She challenged herself to sit in the car at the grocery store while I shopped, and travel with the food in the same car. Then she thought she could cope with having a look around the grocery store. A week later, she ended up beaming with excitement and helping gather the groceries, picking them off the shelves and loading the cart and packing the car. She couldn't unpack the car at home that day. She wanted to get straight on the phone and tell those who cared what a momentous thing she had coped with already. She was thrilled. After that, the demise of the OCD was relatively easy.
How did you deal with the OCD? Fears of touching food during refeeding?
I spoon-fed her.
Was that difficult?
Yes. Prompting every mouthful is a very difficult task. Hand-feeding a teenager is simply not a natural thing to do, and I felt the responsibility of it all keenly. Refeeding an anorexic is very emotional. It is like being on a roller coaster. Highs and lows. And living with an extreme level of stress for a prolonged period takes a toll. I didn't feel normal until 6 months after my daughter was weight restored. Occasionally I was overcome with tears, for no reason. It was like I was grieving. Terrible. I was so frightened. I was focused on trying to save my daughter's life. The refeeding took 7 months, and I didn't give in to the disorders once, ever.
How did your other daughter cope with this?
Our younger daughter is now 12, and she instinctively knew how to help. She would stand next to me and tell her sister to sit down and eat her meal. To stop giving us a hard time. To do what the doctor said. Eat. She slept next to me and her sister for a long time. Even after a year, she was still on a mattress on the floor in her sister's bedroom. She needed lots of hugs and reassuring. During meals, our youngest would eat in another room with her father, so she didn't have to endure the anger and swearing from her sister. She got picked on constantly, but she knew it was the anorexia talking, and not her beloved sister. She told her friends and teacher at school what was going on. She is quite open and insightful, which has helped her deal with the stress.
I understand that your daughter is now fully recovered. How did the experience affect you?
I have changed. I feel I have more depth in my life these days. I am watchful and I worry about my girls more. I try to protect them from stress. They have been through so much. I am very thankful for all the good in our lives, and I am more aware of others suffering from mental illness. I am very interested in continuing to learn about eating disorders and supporting others who are facing the hardship of a loved one suffering from an ED. However, I am angry with the ignorant clinicians at the public ignorance and lack of care facilities in our city. I am truly grateful for the love and support I found on the Around the Dinner Table forum. I am also grateful for the wealth of information and research on the F.E.A.S.T website. Most of all, I am thankful my daughter is alive and well.
Thank you, Kate, for sharing your very difficult experiences with us. You are a remarkable mother, and I hope your story will help many.